I am an incredibly impatient person. I tend to think and act very quickly. Sometimes this has gotten me into a lot of trouble because I've done something that I probably shouldn't have done, and so I kind of look back on with a little bit of regret, with a healthy regret. But it's also enabled me to kind of juggle a lot of responsibilities at once because I can move from task to task and kind of operate with very precision and with quickness. And I've always been like this, even since I was a very young child. Whenever I would do an assignment for school, I would just race through it. I would try to get it done as fast as possible. And part of that was just avoiding the responsibility of my schoolwork. But part of it was just that energy and that feeling of getting something done as quickly as possible. A lot of times this was detrimental to my grades, so I don't want anyone to suffer under the illusion that somehow this is the best way of doing your schoolwork. My grades ended up being mediocre. But when I would take an exam or when I do an assignment, I would see how fast I can get it done. And so I go into an exam room and I would sit down and I would pass out the exams and I would just try to get it done as quickly as possible. And I always tried to be the first one to get it done. And it wasn't really a competitive sort of thing. I wasn't trying to be the first one done just because I wanted to show off that I was better than the other students that were working, but just it was a matter of feeling that urgency to get something done quickly. Now, in my working life, I approached my responsibilities with the same sort of what I call ruthless efficiency. This doesn't mean that I don't take time to plan and kind of organize myself. I think planning and organization are critical for achieving any kind of efficiency in your work. It's one of the most fundamental aspects of my job is just sitting down and looking at the spectrum of options available to me and deciding critically which option is the best one to take first, second, third, etc. Most of the tasks that I do are not possible to achieve in like an hour or even in a day or a week or a month. Academia generally operates on very long time horizons, so I'm often asked to kind of plan a year, 2 years, 3 years in advance for some of the work that I'm doing. And so planning and organization really takes a critical role because there's not much that we can kind of anticipate out beyond maybe 2 weeks in the future. So I really have to think critically about how that long-term planning is going to look. Now, I know when a plan isn't working, whenever I start to feel overwhelmed or stressed out. And you might think that, oh, this is just part of working. And yeah, there's always going to be a certain sense of stress when you're working or when you're doing something that you really care about or that really matters. But if I sit down to work and I start feeling drained, or if I just feel completely stressed out and overwhelmed over what I'm about to do, it's usually because I haven't taken the time to actually sit down and plan out what I'm going to do very well. So I might have a really vague or ambiguous kind of task on my list that just says, do this. And I'm like, okay, well, where do I start? How do I actually do that? I haven't really thought through each of the activities that might be involved in that task. So I use that as my litmus test. It's kind of like, am I doing the right thing, or do I need to plan this out a little bit more? Question is, am I feeling overwhelmed or stressed? If I am, then chances are I need to break this down into a little bit smaller pieces. So one way I do that is just to estimate the amount of time that something takes to complete. Now, a lot of times I see students of mine are trying to plan an activity, and so they'll say, oh, this is going to take a whole day. I try to avoid that amount of time in a task as much as possible. For me, if I can't accomplish a task in like an hour and preferably in 30 minutes, then it's not broken down enough. So I really try to take a task and break it down into the smallest possible increments to like 30-minute activities so that I know precisely what I am going to do. And I think generally speaking, people are really bad at estimating how long a task or an activity might take. So what I usually do is I sit down and I map out the activities that I have to do, and then I assign a time. So maybe this will take 15 minutes, this will take 5 minutes, and then I just double it. I automatically double it because chances are it's going to take a little bit longer than I expect it to. And then that gives me plenty of space in my schedule and then my time planning and my management to really do what it is I set out to do. And I don't feel that sense of like that burden of like at the end of the day not getting enough done kind of thing, because we'll never get enough done, but it's always good to set out a goal and feel like you've accomplished it at the end of the day. The other way I kind of manage my time and manage my activities so that it feels a little bit more achievable is if I'm sitting down and I'm going to say I'm going to write 500 words on a paper or something like that, it can feel a little bit daunting to just have my task read, write 500 words on this paper. So I'll a lot of times kind of make a mental note. What do I need to do in order to get to that point? So kind of the first thing I might need to do is open the document. And it's that simple. For a lot of times for me, just to get started, to get into that flow state, it's just a matter of taking that lowest possible threshold activity and making that my goal. Because I know that I can open a Word document. That's easy. Come on, anybody can open a Word document, but writing 500 words feels a lot heavier. It feels a lot more responsibility. Or even simpler than opening a Word document might be go to the folder where my Word document is saved. Like that is even easier. So I think, okay, come on, I can at least open that folder. That's kind of like, if I can't do that, then I might as well go back to bed. So whenever I'm trying to do an activity and I feel like it's a little bit too much for me to handle, I always try to break it down into the easiest possible step to take so that the entry, the starting point becomes within my grasp, or it becomes a little bit less overwhelming, or I feel a little bit less tension. So the takeaway is this. One, planning can make you uber efficient, but you shouldn't make a plan and stick rigidly to it. Planning should be a daily activity. You should sit down, and I usually spend the last part of my day and the first part of my day kind of planning what comes next and what I'm going to do. And that really helps me create a scope and a framework and respond to new opportunities, to new challenges, to new expectations. Sometimes an activity that I thought was going to take an hour takes 4 hours. So then I have to kind of chart what I want to do. So planning is not one and done. It's a repeated, I plan and replan each day. The other key takeaway here is once I have a specific set of tasks or activities, I always try to break them down into the very smallest increment, so that I have a task that maybe takes 5 minutes or 10 minutes. A lot of times I'll put a time block on my calendar, 15 minutes, write an email. And I know it's not going to take me 15 minutes to write an email, but it might take me 15 minutes to write an email because sometimes it's really difficult to find the right words to tell somebody something. Or I have realized that, there's an attachment that needs to go in this email that I have to complete that first. So giving yourself a very small window of time to do a very, very micro level activity can help you feel accomplished. And at the end of the day, if you have a bunch of 15-minute activities, 30-minute activities, hour-long activities that you've achieved, then you will feel satisfied. You'll feel grateful that you were able to do those things rather than feeling overwhelmed at the prospect that you haven't achieved this huge task that you're set before yourself. And then you have to drag that into your next working day.